Today I'm taking care of going over environmental toxins, at least an intro to it. There'll be some things that we cover directly from the slides. I'll make sure you get some information that you need, especially for exams and things like that. But I'll also maybe throw in some of my own information as we go, depending on where we are. So, and then of course, if you have any questions, I'll try to leave a few minutes at the end to cover that also. So the goal, keep our diet and environment as toxin-free as possible in order to promote the quality of life, prevention, and prevent disease. You know, I said, I think in the first class when we were together earlier in the weekend, toxicity and deficiency. You know, if we look at health from that standpoint and we say, listen, there's something wrong with this person's health, we're trying to understand their case a little bit better, and we look at it and we say, listen, there's either something in here, that there's too much of something in here that we need to get rid of, or there's not enough of something in there that we have to put to make this system work a little bit better. And so if we look at it from that standpoint, obviously it's an oversimplification, but if you just sort of zoom out, you start to say, where are the toxicities? And there's so many sources which we'll cover today. Where are the deficiencies? And we start to remove the things that we have too much of and put back the things that we need. All of a sudden, this organism starts to work better again, and we can start shifting people back in the right direction as far as their health is concerned. It's vitally important to recognize that children are far more susceptible to damage of environmental carcinogens and endocrine disrupting compounds than adults. I mean, it's interesting, you know, kids, and we'll go over this, but you know, kids are exposed to toxicity from literally day one in the womb. And you know, they are more susceptible. They're in massive growth phases, you know, for the first decade or so. And so as we're growing and our body is changing and our cells are dividing and they're being exposed to all this toxicity at that time, it really affects the developmental process. And that's, you know, why so many of us are here this weekend to learn about that. So a little bit about the body burden. Environmental Working Group, I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but if you're not, you should definitely check them out. They're a great organization, and they look at toxicity from so many different angles in terms of products that are out there, in terms of, you know, things like this too, like toxins in bloom. But they're a great organization, and they're just trying to also improve, you know, which chemicals or how often we're using chemicals or how do we reduce some of the chemicals. On average, contained over 200 chemical pollutants, including PCBs, dioxins, flame retardants, DDT, pesticides, and mercury. Total 287 different chemicals, carcinogenic, you know, nervous system disruptors, hormone disruptors, causing birth defects and abnormal development, of course. At the bottom there, CDC study, 400 adults, 95% had some amount of EPA. Each year, chemical companies in the US manufacture 6.5 trillion pounds of 9,000 different chemicals. I mean, you know, when we do testing on kids or adults, you know, and you start to see there's, you know, there's all this arsenic, there's all this mercury, and, you know, parents are like, where did this come from? I don't, you know, the first thought maybe with lead, it's like, well, I don't eat paint chips, right? But we know that it's in so many places. Or mercury, I don't really eat that much fish. But, you know, unfortunately, especially if you live in New Jersey, I guess, in New York, we have a lot of toxicity too. You know, you know, if you eat food, and you drink water, and you breathe the air, you're probably being exposed on a regular basis. You know, some people seem to hold on to that much more than others. Some people seem to filter it and kind of clear things out. Some people have the ability to clear certain things out very effectively, but hold on to others. And I think that's our job. Our job is to understand that we're all being exposed all the time. And understanding how we can start helping other people identify which are those chemicals that they're holding on to. How do we filter them? And if they're just from like a single exposure or from a period of time, let's say they had a certain job for a period of time, or they lived in a certain house for a period of time, and so they were able to accumulate these toxins, and you clear them, and now there's no more source, it might be fine, and they can just kind of move on from there. In other times, the source is relatively constant, and so not only do you have to go through a process of detoxification initially, but then there might be some type of ongoing detoxification that we're going to do, you know, on some regular basis to try to continue shifting them or not allowing them to shift back in an unhealthy direction. I mean, here's a list, it's in your book, you know, arsenic, lead, mercury, PVC, I mean, you name it. There is so much in our environment. And, you know, kids' toys, kids' food products, you know, how they're growing our food, both animals and plants. I mean, there's a lot of challenges in our environment, that's for sure. And again, this isn't, a lot of this, going through this morning, I'm looking at it, I'm like, wow, this is really scary. Like, I know it, and I'm reading it. As I'm reading it, I'm like, man, I'm getting scared again. This isn't about being scared. It's not about being so concerned. It's just about being aware. Because if we're aware, then we can do something about it. And if we're not, then, it's just a completely missed piece of the puzzle for so many of these kids and these families. I love this, Mark Twain. The problems that exist in the world cannot be solved by the same level of thinking that created them. And so all of a sudden, we need to really zoom out, and really evaluate this scenario from 30,000 feet and say, how did we get here? Because we need to, not only, like in this class, we're going to talk about toxicity and detox, but, there needs to be a movement underneath that. And there is already, but, we need to build it stronger. But there needs to be a movement to say, okay, I understand they exist now. I understand how to find them in my patients, and I understand how to start getting them out of my patients. So that's really important. And is there a way that we could start a process where we're exposing these people less? It's just not acceptable anymore to know that all of this is in our food supply, it's in our water supply, it's in the air that we breathe. And while we have solutions to help people deal with it, we also need solutions for dealing with the problem and changing the practices that are actually creating this in the first place. So I think he was right about that. This is hard to see, I think, in the book, but basically, here's a barrel. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to explain this. This is sort of my version, but I usually say, if you're a 16-ounce glass, okay, and you're being filled with water, so you're the glass, the water is toxicity. Toxicity comes from all these places. If you look, it's the air everything we said, air, the EMFs, stuff that's in the water. We'll talk about this later more. Stuff that's in the food, all the plastics and chemicals that our products are being made out of, all the skin cares, hair, soap, moisturizer, all these different kinds of things. So, your 16-ounce glass is constantly being filled with, all these different toxins. And we need to recognize that, step one. And step two, we need to do something about it. In my mind, the way I explain this to patients, there's three things we can do. The first thing is to slow the flow of toxicity. Identify where it is in your life and start removing it, right? That way, there's not as much coming in. Are you ever going to get all of it? No, it's just impossible. But can you at least find the big ones in your life? Can you at least find the ones that are really impacting you in a big way? And start removing them and just start substituting. There's almost, for as many products as there are with these terrible chemicals in them, there are products that exist that are similar to this. So it's just a question of going through the process and going back to the store and shopping and looking and understanding. And in some cases, you just don't need the product either. So that's the whole other step. So step one is slow the flow. Look for ways you can remove it. Step two, in my opinion, is become a bigger glass. If you're a 16-ounce glass, you can only handle 16 ounces of toxicity before you start overflowing. If you were a 32-ounce glass, you can handle more. And I think in the world that we live in, we need to handle more. And so to me, what that means is, that goes back to the member toxicity and deficiency. So what does our body need more of so that we can tolerate the environment that we live in? Most of us are not as healthy as we could be. Most of us have other health challenges that we're working on. And so as we work through those other challenges, as we become healthier versions of ourselves, as we become more sufficient in all of the ingredients that our body needs to function well, we can tolerate our environment better, which takes us from a 16-ounce glass to a 32-ounce glass. And then the third step that we have to do is detoxify, because we're already full, most of us. Even if you don't realize it, you probably are. And so what do we need to do? We need to basically punch a hole in the bottom of that bucket and start draining, right? So if we put less in, if we become a bigger bucket and we drain the garbage that we've already accumulated over the years out, now we have a three-step process for actually managing toxicity in our life over time. So, how do these things get into our body? I mean, every which way, but again, what we breathe, what we put on our skin, what we put in our mouth, both food, supplements, drugs, they all basically go into our body, they circulate through, they have to go through our liver to get processed, and once they're processed, hopefully, we're able to eliminate it. Skin is the biggest detox organ we have. Most people forget about skin. It's probably the most important piece of this puzzle, I think. One, because we're constantly putting stuff on our skin that's blocking our ability to get things out of our body. So we have to keep that in mind, including things like, deodorants, and specifically antiperspirant, which have aluminum, which we'll cover later. So skin is one of our biggest detox organs, and we need to support that system. And we need to understand that when patients come in with skin issues, so many times it's not something we have to put on that to get rid of it. It's something in them trying to get out, and we need to figure out how to help that process occur so that they can process these toxins. Kidneys, obviously, so through urine, colon, through feces, and lungs as we exhale. And so we need to basically, spend time healing these systems so that as stuff is going through, they have a way out. In all detox, I was just having a conversation outside, and somebody was asking me about chelation, which we'll talk about later, and we do it primarily orally. But we spend at least 4 to 6 weeks, sometimes 8 weeks or more, not actively going after toxins or metals. We spend that time healing those systems, because if there's no way out, you're basically, it's like all the soot is at the bottom of the glass, and you're just gonna stir it, and it's gonna, there's no way out, and you're just gonna aggravate the system. So you have to spend the time with these patients really improving the elimination pathways so that there's a way out, so that once you actually detox, you're not just stirring the pot, you're actually getting rid of these toxins. And the last part of this slide just showing you that, when these systems don't work properly and things go through your liver, they get stored. Where do they get stored? They love fat. Most of these toxins are fat soluble. And so bone marrow, adipose tissue, but also myelin, sure, the fatty sheets around our nerves. So basically, a lot of this stored toxicity, that's what we're ultimately going to be going after. When you start upregulating the exit pathways, some of the free-floating toxicity has a way out. So that just starts getting filtered. A lot of times people start feeling better right away once their elimination pathways are open. But once they're open, that's when we start digging. That's when we start going into the cells and start pulling stuff out to really shift them away from that level of toxicity. Different phases of detox. So basically, as a summary, again, you could look at some of those details, but in the summary would be, phase 1 is basically to start breaking these toxins down, making them less reactive. So cytochrome P450 in the liver does a lot of that work. Something that they don't talk too much about here, but I think it's important to note is just, again, in the first foundations of nutrition, we were talking about all the ingredients, the magnesiums, the zincs, the B2s, B3s, B6s, B12s, all of these cofactors that are required for all of the systems in our body to work properly. They're all going to be required in the detoxification pathways too. So we learn that early on in foundations, and it repeats itself over and over again throughout the whole course, because those are the same ingredients that are going to be required. We need a tremendous amount of niacin for NADPH to be a source of a reducing compound to keep these systems working properly. So step 1 is about starting the process of making them more water soluble and oxidizing them. Phase 2 is really about conjugation and making them even further water soluble so that they can be eliminated through feces and bile. We need sulfur compounds in phase 2, so a lot of times, and I think this gets brought up a little later, but some cruciferous vegetables to really get some of those sulfur-bearing aminos into the system to continue that process is critical. And then as long as we can basically stop them from being as reactive, we start to become more water soluble, then we could actually eliminate them through our elimination pathways. So here's some of that in a little bit more detail. Again, what shows up? The B vitamins, B2, B3, B6, B12, folic acid, of course, glutathione, milk thistle, vitamin E, vitamin C, all required for the first phase of detox. In the second phase of detox, we need those amino acids, those sulfur-bearing amino acids. So, that's a big part of that. And of course, garlic and cruciferous vegetables also critical. So again, there's times where we could supplement through actual, vitamins and mineral supplementation that we're taking. There's times where it's just come from our food. I'm a big proponent of using food as a tool. But what you'll notice, which is interesting, again, you start to just see these things clinically, and you say, well, gee, all right, I want you to start eating more broccoli and cauliflower. And people are like, oh, I get so gassy when I eat cauliflower and broccoli, right? So now they're being tortured because they're trying to eat these cruciferous stuff. They're not breaking it down properly. Then you're like, oh man, you have gut issues we have to deal with, right? So now we're going back into pH and enzymes to improve the digestive process so that they can actually pull the sulfur-bearing aminos out for this whole system. So again, these are all great, and I love thinking about them as individual systems, but we have to remember that all of these individual systems are in this one organism, this one person, and they're all connected. And so we have to understand that and try to address, the full person, not just the system that we're interested in. And then, like I said, as it's waste products through, right through the gallbladder, through bile, through conjugation, through bile, through the bowel, or through the kidneys and urine, and then what's not mentioned there again, which we talked about, was the skin, another great pathway out. So again, I think I brought this up in the beginning, but basically we have to evaluate these patients and say, are you getting a single exposure, or did you get a 3-month exposure because you worked in this factory, or did you get a 10-year exposure because you lived in this house but now you moved? So are these exposures that had a beginning and an end, or are these exposures that are ongoing? Because those are going to be handled differently. You still might detox that person similarly in the beginning, but ultimately we need to know, is the source gone or not? And do they need some sort of maintenance? Or do they need some sort of nutritional program that's going to allow their system to filter more effectively on an ongoing basis? So properties of chemical detoxification ability, some chemicals persist. Why? So some chemicals persist because they're fat soluble, and they get stored in our fat tissue, and instead of going through, maybe we'll talk about this here, instead of going through processes where we're breaking our own fat down to release those toxins, we're just constantly storing more fat, which means we're never really releasing that out of our system. Some of these, sometimes it's those elimination pathways, like I was saying, if the skin is blocked, if kidneys aren't functioning as well as they need to, if liver or bile isn't as functional as it needs to be, a lot of these chemicals are going to persist. I don't think I brought it up in the nutrition, but one of the plans that we use a lot, we use high fat, low carb diets. We do a lot of ketosis, and we do some fasting. And part of the reason for that is because when you're in that phase, and that's not necessarily a lifestyle forever, but when you're in that phase, your body is forced to go back into storage, right? So if you're eating a high carb diet in general, and you're basically exceeding your caloric or your sugar need for any given day, all that excess glucose is going to be stored as triglycerides in adipose tissue. So if you're constantly in a storage mode that way, then your fat cells are going to keep getting built up, and you're really never going into storage on a regular basis to pull all that crap out. So by going through different phases of nutrition, you can encourage the system to actually re-break down all that stored triglyceride, bring it back out and burn that for energy through lipolysis and ketosis. So, and that's a great detox pathway tool. So we use that regularly in terms of helping our patients detox. So, and then we'll mix that with different detoxification programs while they're doing different diet and nutrition programs. What is the impact of toxic chemical exposure? So, it's damage, right? It's damage, it's inflammation, and it's chronic illness. So far, each talk that came up for me this weekend, we're talking about this enormous increase in chronic illness in the U.S. And so yesterday at lunch, I was talking about Crohn's and colitis, but again, that's autoimmunity as a whole is skyrocketing every year. Cancer, skyrocketing every year. Autism, skyrocketing every year. You name the chronic illness, it is not stagnant. It is increasing exponentially year after year. And so the only thing changing as rapidly as our health is our environment. And so we can't ignore that anymore, and we have to look at our environment to understand that our environment directly affects the inflammatory process in our body, which is directly creating this chronic inflammation and chronic illness for ourselves and our kids. Is pregnancy a time of particular pediatric vulnerability? Of course. So a lot of times we'll have a child in the office, we'll do some testing, we'll see what they have. This is a great, so I think did I talk about the arsenic in your group? No. Yeah. So I had a patient, this is like 2 weeks ago, so it was on my mind. He's 4. certain neurologic and developmental issues. So we ran a urine toxic metal test on him, and his arsenic was like 750 something. And the parents were like, "Oh my God, why is this happening? We don't have any arsenic." And I'm like, "Well, do you know where it's coming?" Like, arsenic is pretty prevalent in our environment. So we started talking about that. And then I said, "Listen, I was talking to my mom, I said, have you ever been tested?" She was like, "No." I was like, "Maybe we should do that." So sure enough, lead, mercury, arsenic, off the charts for her. And this isn't like a shot at moms at all, but it's important to be aware of, our ability to pass these things down generationally is almost scary. So, anytime, and this kid's 4, and they're talking about getting pregnant again. So not only are we gonna be working with their son and trying to figure these steps out and to detoxify him and get this taken care of, and I'm confident that we will, but I'm like, listen, I need like 6 months before you decide to try to get pregnant again, because we're gonna basically mirror what we're doing for your son with you, because if we can clear some of this out, we have a better chance of having a positive outcome, next go around. And so, when you start to think about it in this way, I think you start to see, how interrelated, we are as a family and environmentally too. So, there's a lot of good information here. Each neurotoxic contaminant may perhaps cause a negligible effect, but it's the combined effect. So what this is basically saying is, listen, each one of these little, so maybe the mercury levels aren't that high. Maybe the lead levels aren't that high. Maybe the BPA levels aren't that high. But if you start to think about it, you start to recognize that this plus this plus this, it's not even addition, I'd say it's multiplication. This times this times this. So when you start to look at it, you start to say, well, none of these are that high, but you have 11 of them, that's a big deal, right? So, it's the cumulative effect of each toxin and the cumulative effect of the combined effect of each toxin working together. EPA estimates 87,000 chemicals currently widespread in the US. This is where it starts to get scary. It's just, identified 5 industrial chemicals as the developmental neurotoxins. There's so many more, but these are just some of the highlights. And again, they're pervasive. They're in our environment all over the place. They're very hard to avoid, but education helps. So as you go through, like I said, the environmental working group is a great source. So if you go through their site, you start seeing some of these chemicals, you start seeing where they show up. These are conversations we could have with our families and say, listen, did you know that these shampoos have these chemicals? Did you know that makeup has, heavy metals in it? Did you know? And so you just start educating them without hopefully overwhelming them too badly. And you start helping them clean up their own environment also. So updated slide. So here's a few more to add to that picture. So fluoride, manganese, DDT, fire retardants. There's just so many. Here's a slide just to show, again, this is just exactly what I said before. Here's the blue graph is, the production of chemicals in the US, and the red line showing the increase in autism. Is it causal? We can't say that necessarily. Is it correlated? Of course it is. And beyond that, it's not just autism, right? It's kind of like, to some extent, patients who say, well, genes, the genetic effect always comes up in the office. We say, I think that the environment is changing. We're being exposed to toxins, though that's not controversial to say, that's basically the reality. The way your body tolerates this is individual. So there might be a genetic component to, which SNPs you have, what are you filtering well? Maybe you filter mercury really well, and I filter lead really well, right? So there could be a piece of the genetic expression that allows certain chemicals to be processed differently in different people. And then what that'll lead to is, if your expression says, I don't filter these things well, maybe that's more of an autoimmune component that'll show up for that patient. If these systems aren't working properly, maybe that's a little bit more of like a, driving us towards cancer, let's say. And if these, so I think that's an important concept to share with families, because the idea here is that, this is happening, and it's happening, with so many different chronic illnesses that we're all being exposed to. We need to look for common denominators. I think that's the thing that I talk about the most when talk with other doctors is, you know, patterns and common denominators tell us where priorities are. And, you know, environmental toxins, 100% is one of those patterns that we need to look for to understand our patients the best we can so that we can help them shift their health. So, let's talk detox. So, you know, basically, xenobiotics, so, you know, hormone mimickers and our body's ability to clear these out. Again, so some enzymes that do that, cytochrome P450, UDP. So basically how, again, a lot of this has to do with, you know, we have glutathione in our system. We have catalases, we have superoxide dismutase. We have all of these pathways that allow us to take these toxins and try to make them less reactive inside of our body. And in order to do that, we need a constant supply of reducing agents. And in order to have a constant supply of reducing agents, we need proper cofactors, which goes back to the niacins, the B12s, the B9s, all these methyl donors, and you know, all of these systems that allow us to constantly if that system breaks down, all of a sudden you build up the intermediates, and as the intermediates get built up in our system, that's where things really start to break down. So being aware of, you know, not just the macro we talked about last time, there's the macronutrients, the fats, the proteins, and the carbs, but the micronutrients being cofactors for all of these reactions, and knowing how to test for those so that we can make sure that those cycles at least they have the raw materials to keep those cycles going. That's critical. What do we have here? Toxic metals, mercury, lead, arsenic, PCBs, phthalates. So they inhibit thyroid function, cause mitochondrial dysfunction, lead to oxidative stress, increase neuroexcitability, cause inflammation. Again, you know, if you look at all those same reactions that I'm talking about, you know, especially heavy metals, but a lot of these, they're either going to block, you know, they're going to block hormone production or hormone synthesis. They're going to block a lot of our, you know, healing and recovery pathways. So the end result is obviously an increase in oxidative stress, an increase in inflammation, and we need to figure out ways to deal with that. So toxins and autism for sure. You know, toxic metals, significant relationship between blood levels of mercury and the diagnosis of autism spectrum. You know, pesticides, the glyphosates. You know, he doesn't go into glyphosate too much in here. I just want to say, you know, make a mention of that. So, you know, glyphosate or brand name Roundup. You know, one of the reasons that they were able to get that to be so pervasive in how they farm was that it works on, you know, the shikimate pathway, which, you know, what they'll say is that human cells don't have that. So it's okay to use it because it virtually has no effect on the human body because our cells don't have that pathway. It's really a microorganism pathway. But it turns out, you know, especially this weekend we could talk about it, you know, our microbiome is full of microorganisms. And so while it may not affect the human cell directly, although I might disagree with that to some extent, it does 100% affect the microbiome in a big way. And it's basically like an antibiotic in some ways. And so, you know, the amount of glyphosate used, especially on a lot of these crops, it's even being used not only as a pesticide, you know, while the plants are growing, but it's sprayed on even higher amounts as a desiccant to dry these crops out. And, you know, then it's just going right into the mill, and then it's going right into our mouths and into our mouths of our kids. And so, you know, this is created, you know, along with all these other toxins, again, not to scare you, but to become aware of it, has created such an enormous influx of glyphosate in our body. And there are some labs that have great glyphosate tests. And I, again, just added to your list of tools that you have, you know, running a glyphosate test on some of your families, some of these kids, some of the parents, some of the kids, can be really meaningful. So you, A, understand what you're working on as you're detoxing them, but two, help them understand what the source of some of their toxins are, so that they can make some changes in their lifestyle.
Is there a vaccine that has glyphosate in it?
I think a few of them, I don't think that they're on the ingredients per se. They're not on the ingredient list at all, but I believe some of the products that are entered, so it's not listed, it's not like they're adding it to it, but it could be on it from, you know, by some of the raw materials that are being used in But it's certainly not on the, like packages or like mercury, or aluminum.
Even mercury, they don't have to actually, it's in the process of making the vaccine. What they do is they put preservative free, but if you add it from the beginning of the process or the making of it, they don't have to list it. The only way that you can actually be sure, and there's no such thing as,
Right.
green vaccine yet. When you look at the packet, it says, do not administer to anyone who is sensitive to mercury. And I've taken those.
Oh,
You
wow.
know that 3 foot long?
Yeah.
The
That's like
microphone? Yeah, it says, do not.
The one you can't read?
Yeah, do not administer to anyone who has an allergy to mercury.
Wow.
So it's a play.
Yeah.
Life says probably are in there, so.
Thank you. Prenatal tobacco lead exposure significantly also with ADD, ADHD. Children exposed to higher levels. I mean, we know all this. The more toxicity we're exposed to, the more neurologic impact there is. If you impose these on developing children, you're going to have neurodegenerative or at least sort of neural delay, as these kids are developing. So, case control retrospective study, ASD and air pollution, prevalence of ASD in each state significantly correlated with the number of landfills. Again, you just, of course, that there's this enormous correlation, not causal, direct, but enormous correlation between how much exposure to toxicity we have and how much neurologic developmental issues we're going to see. If you guys do, I don't know if you do or you don't, but certainly could add it again to your list of things you do, but doing some of these gene tests, these gene SNP tests, you can take a look at some of these different gene SNPs and ultimately how they show up clinically in your office. Again, now in some of these, to some extent, and I think we'll see that our body's amazing and it's able to compensate in different ways. So I don't know that these are also written in stone and so permanent that there's no way kind of around it or that the body doesn't compensate. But just to know these, just to understand that, okay, here's a pathway, and because of this SNP, this pathway is either slow or maybe blocked completely. So here's a way around it. Here's an ingredient that we can add into the system to sort of bypass that. I think that's an important piece of this. The MTHFR is probably one of the most well-known at this point, but just to say, if that pathway is being blocked, but if we add, methyl tetrahydrofolate, the cofactor, the bioavailable version of that same nutrient, we can drive that system, even though the person has an issue in terms of degradation or breaking down or making that cofactor active. So male mice succumbed to mercury more than female. So yeah, boys are definitely more likely. This is true for I think a lot of other issues as well. But so lower glutathione levels, higher oxidative stress, excrete metals less readily, and estrogen has some antioxidant components to it. That's one thing. Estrogen does have a very protective mechanism. That men don't have much of, but it's interesting to also see that a lot of women, some of their metal issues don't show up until after menopause, and so, or other toxins too, I'm sure. But as hormones shift in a woman's life, as will their toxic load, or at least how it shows up in their body. And so to be aware of that, because you could have done a test on somebody 10 years prior, everything looked good and there was no issues and there were no symptoms necessarily, and then all of a sudden as hormones shift in that woman's life, new problems arise, and sometimes that's a big part of it. So impaired sulfation, glutathione levels, obviously, because your body's working extra hard to clear these things out. Abnormal liver detoxification, selenium, zinc, iron. Again, this goes back to our nutrition talk earlier in the weekend. Making sure the raw materials of cofactors that run these systems are in there, right, is absolutely foundationally critical to all of these cases. So here's the methylation cycle. Basically, again, so this is just what I was just talking about, right? So here's, folate, methyl tetrahydrofolate, and how that's gonna keep donating methyl groups to the system. Here's SAMe, If SAMe gets methylated, we're in good shape. If this methylation cycle gets stuck, instead of SAMe, we're getting stuck with increasing levels of homocysteine. As homocysteine levels build up, we have all kinds of inflammatory systems that are, or inflammatory state that's affecting a lot of different systems inside of our body. So that's a critical piece of that. I'm not sure, I guess SAMe is the light switch that turns that on. I think that's what that but ultimately, like I said, if homocysteine builds up, ultimately, our elimination pathways are going to be getting blocked, inflammation is going to build, and we're going to become more and more toxic as a result. So what is methylation? Attach of methyl groups to a protein which changes its function. That's exactly, so SAMe, which people use as a supplement too. Right? So SAMe can be used as like potentially as a mood stabilizer because it has some great neurotransmitter effect. When you remove SAMe's methyl groups, it turns into this crazy inflammatory, harmful chemical. And when you put methyl groups back onto homocysteine, it turns into this wonderfully happy, mood stabilizing neurotransmitter, amino acid. So, it's just amazing when one thing shifts in that amino acid, it completely changes the function of that same group. So this is one of the body's mechanisms to regulate enzyme activity and gene expression. And again, what do we need? We need the B vitamins, the B12s, the B9s, folic acid, zinc, magnesium. We need to deal with oxidative stress, and of course, checking the genes can only help you become a little bit more specific and purposeful in whatever plan you're creating for those patients. So methylation, if it's not working, abnormal neurotransmitter balance, that's what we were just saying, abnormal protein function, abnormal response to the environment, abnormal detox capacity, increased risk of cancer for a million reasons, but let's just say chronic inflammation being at the root of that, and then increased risk of infectious disease. Again, your body just, if you're putting undue stress, if your bucket is full, back to that early slide, if your bucket is full, your ability to express health is massively limited. Part of the idea of what I was saying earlier, becoming, going from a 16-ounce glass to a 32-ounce glass, we're all going to have stress in our life. That's true for us, and it's true for everyone we're ever going to treat. And so understanding that idea and constantly being on a search for ourselves too, because as a practitioner, we're put under a lot of stress to help all these families. So when you understand that and you take the steps every day to become the healthiest version of you, your ability to tolerate your environment will be exponentially higher. Our level of health is directly related to our ability to adapt to our environment. When we can no longer adapt to our environment, that's when all of these things start taking hold. And our genetic makeup may play a big role in where our starting point is, and then the rest of all of the decisions that we make every day in our life is the rest of that story. And the environment is just one big piece of that pie. It's not the whole piece, but it's big. So heavy metals leading to toxic exposure, progression, pregnancy and childhood, mercury, lead. And so here's some sources. Again, when you have a family that comes in, you're like, how did I get, lead? Well, water, air pollution, paint, soil, computer, candles, aluminum. These are just such prevalent issues. The arsenic in rice and chicken is very common. And a lot of kids who, their diets are pretty, especially when we're working with, neurologically, developmentally challenged kids, their diets initially are often very limited. And what are they eating? They're eating pasta, they're eating rice, they're eating chicken nuggets and pizza. So like if you looked at the ingredient list, it's pretty short. And if you understood the environmental toxicity load, it's glyphosate, it's arsenic, there's so many chemicals in those basic foods that shifting that alone is so meaningful for so many of these kids. So a plan, removal of the bad guys. That's what I said, right? So now we have to start doing tests to say, what does this person have too much of that we're trying to get rid of? Doctors' data, we use them a lot. I don't do the hair tests as much these days. I still do a lot of the provocative urine tests for metals. Great Plains has some of those environmental, they have a really big environmental toxicity panel, and they also have a big glyphosate panel, urine panel.
So do you give an IVT meter to provoke them? For the
For the urine?
oral.
Or
Yeah. Everything I do is oral.
what was the question?
Do I use a provoking agent for the
Before the test?
For the test, yeah. So I'll do a non-provoke, like baseline. I'll do a provoke, and then we'll maintain. I'll keep checking.
This, unprovoked.
I check both. Yeah.
And when you give
Along the way.
one dose of.
For the
How
test?
do you, yes,
So for the test, yeah. So for the test, when we do that, for the urine provoke. So basically, they wake up in the morning, the void first morning urine, then we'll give them the provoking agent, and then we'll collect urine for the next 8 hours, and then you collect a nice bucket of urine, and then you just send like a test tube for to the lab, and they'll check that out.
And by the way, that actually for medical legal purposes, because we like to keep the licenses.
Yeah.
That is the only way that you can, if you have to defend yourself in a state board, medical board, is the only test that has validity, that you do you give a provoking agent and post, and that's how you're able, I do it IV, you can do it orally, but what you do is you get a urine, you give the provoking agent, and then you get a urine again, and if you can demonstrate that the person has, is pulling heavy metals, then you document in your chart that we documented heavy metal exposure and elimination, and therefore you're justified in continuing.
Okay.
What do you use for provoking agent? What is it?
I use like the EDTA. because
EDTA or DMSA is typical.
in New York State, you can't really use DMPS anymore, you lose your license.
So here's, I don't know if this was provoked or unprovoked, or if it's just a sample, but here's just an idea. Here's toxic metals and what their levels, could look like. This is actually what that. This is actually not as bad. That kid that I was talking about had a even higher level of arsenic there. Deficiency of protein, calcium, zinc, selenium, iron, vitamin E. Can all increase lead absorption. A lot of these metals, so minerals, zinc, calciums, magnesium, minerals are metals. And so a lot of these heavy metals just are competitive binders to a lot of our reactions. And so if you have enough of the healthy metals, the minerals and things that we need, you could help be blocking some of those binding sites. And if these metals get into our system, they have the ability to one, block the absorption of things that we're looking for, but two, increase, they almost build on themselves. I tell patients they're like magnets, and they start, a little bit starts building up, and you start becoming a magnet, and you start absorbing even more when you're being exposed. They cause poor heme synthesis, again, so, heme's job is to be that ring to hold iron in place, and again, you can get competitive binding and have poor heme synthesis. Reduces glutamine synthesis, reduces GABA. I mean, it's going to have enormous impacts in hormone synthesis and neurotransmitter synthesis. I mean, that's what these things do. And so, if you're a developing child, it's going to block so much of that developmental process. For women with blood lead levels, so again, is this all from the working group, I think? But it's, here it's in your book, but these are guidelines depending on what the blood levels of lead look like in these women, what steps they may want to take. The body's got this amazing ability. Metals in your blood. This is why why we chose to do these urine tests the way that we do them. Our metals in your blood are very reactive. Your body cannot tolerate high levels of lead or mercury floating around your blood for any length of time. So our body's ability to get that out of the bloodstream somewhere is a goal of our body. So, ideally you would process it and you would actually eliminate it. But in many cases, like I said, if those levels are too high or if those elimination pathways are blocked, your body's going to store it. And so, if I see a patient and their levels in their blood are very high, I'm very nervous. If you didn't just like break a thermometer and eat it, and you have high levels of mercury in your body, to me it's like, how is this all your storage sites are full. So your body is completely full, and now you can't even get rid of, you're not getting it out of your body, and your internal storage is full, and so now it's circulating freely. That's an enormous issue. So, you know, when blood levels are high, you know, again, that just makes me very nervous. Now in women, postmenopausal women, I think I see this a little bit more, only because as a lot of lead could be stored in bone, and so as bone starts to demineralize, that may show up a little bit higher in blood levels. Arsenic, added to the feed of young chickens to kill parasites and promote growth. How about that? Accumulates in chickens, passed in their excrement, used as fertilizer. So, you know, it's given to the chicken, so if they're not getting rid of it, it's in them when you're eating them. And then when they poop and we turn that into fertilizer, we put that all over our vegetables. How about that? So how do we get arsenic in our body? Things like this. Crazy. Anyways, there's a lot of it. There's a lot of exposure to it. And again, some people process it really well, some people don't. US apples and rice, also contaminated with arsenic. Mercury, one of the most toxic non-radioactive elements on the planet. Our country alone releases 200 metric tons of mercury into the environment every year. And again, it's in your water, it's on your food that's being grown, it's in the air that we're breathing. It's scary. Mercury released into the atmosphere eventually returns to Earth in the form of rainwater, polluting every body of water on the planet. Again, if you start looking around at this stuff, you start to see that even like we were talking about glyphosate too, a lot of these toxins, they're just not broken down ever. And so if you start looking at the water cycles that go on Earth, you know, things evaporate, they come back down. They move to the next place, they evaporate, they move a couple of thousand miles, and they come back down. And, you know, the rainwater, the runoff, you know, I mean, who would drink, I don't know where you guys live, I live in New Jersey, so I definitely would, but who here would drink water from a river or a lake anywhere near their house? You know, I mean, it's crazy. Like, there was a point in time where if we couldn't do that, we wouldn't have survived. And now there's a point in time, if you did do that, you wouldn't survive. I mean, it's crazy how toxic our environment has become. How are we doing on time? 10 minutes. That's not enough time. There's a lot of toxins. Dental amalgams are a huge source of mercury, of course. You know, this is crazy. I mean, I don't know where you guys stand on some of these topics. Obviously, some of them might be considered controversial, though I don't think that they are. But, you know, mercury in your mouth, that's not toxic. That's okay. We're allowed to do that. But as soon as you pull it out of somebody's mouth, it's toxic waste, and you have to, you know, get rid of it immediately. Like, that doesn't make any sense. That's impossible. So clearly, mercury, you know, harmful if vapors are inhaled. Okay? Who grinds their teeth? Just me? Come on. You know, if you're grinding your teeth, you are releasing, and you have amalgams, you're releasing vapor into your brain, basically. So, you know, of course these things are horrifically dangerous. And the idea that we've even bought into the concept that in your mouth it's safe and out of your mouth it's toxic waste, it's impossible. Clearly it's toxic either way. So anyway, don't just get them removed, you know, like go to I think any dentist is capable, right? But if they put them in your mouth, they probably don't think they're that bad. So they may not take all the steps that we need them to take when they remove them. So you really want to go to a good biologic dentist to understand these things. And is taking all the protective measures, both for them, but also for you. So that if you do get them removed or tell patients to get them removed, you know, have other professionals that you work with who know how to do this properly to keep everybody safe, and recognize the fact that even if you're perfectly safe doing this, you're gonna have exposure. And if you're gonna have exposure, and you're doing this because you've already done some testing to know that they have mercury issues, maybe you wanna do a little bit of work to help them shift their mercury levels in the first place, then, you know, do a few things in preparation of having them removed, and then follow that removal up with further detoxification to make sure that it's full circle, that you're preventing as much exposure and accumulation as you can. Okay? And if you have questions about any of that stuff, I'm happy to chat about it later. This was funny. So why are we not supposed to eat humans anymore? Because they contain toxic levels of mercury, thanks to all the fillings in their teeth. I like that. Other way around, maybe too. Aluminum, again, it's everywhere. And you're gonna see the same thing. It's a competitive binder, so it's gonna competitively bind and block so many of these different pathways that we need running. And the pathways that they block are the same pathways that help detoxify them. So, again, it becomes this cumulative experience inside these patients' bodies. Again, reduces heme, it's gonna reduce glutamic acid, it's gonna get in the way of our body's detox pathways and ability to clear it. So we were talking about glyphosate, right? So Monsanto workers wear this as they're, getting ready to spray that on your food, right? So it's not okay for him to be there, but it's totally fine for us to eat it. It's just nuts. We've gone off the deep end. Phthalates, God, everywhere. They're so pervasive. They are absolute hormone disruptors, known to cause sperm and genital problems in males. Levels of prenatal exposure correlate with reduced masculine play in boys. There's a lot of thought out there that there's this estrification of not just humans, pretty much all species, shifting towards this more, female or more estrogen-like in terms of activity, in terms of physical appearance, and these toxins, both heavy metals and phthalates, play a huge role in the shift of that process that's happening to us. They act as a peroxisome percolator, which results in abnormal fatty acid oxidation and DNA damage. These things are going to block, they're going to block, oxidation of fatty acids, all that stuff I was talking about, trying to shift people's diet so that they start burning fat in a different way. These things get in the way of that process. You have a woman who, is starting to do a low carb, high fat diet, and they're starting to try to push some ketosis, and they're blocked, and they're not making ketones. It's because they can't oxidize fatty acids properly. If they can't oxidize fatty acids properly, that's a liver issue. If they have a liver issue, they probably have a toxicity issue. So again, you have to zoom out and understand how these things are all related to each other and say, wait, if we can't get this to happen, we need to go back to that problem, clear their liver, right? Work on some detox pathways, figure out maybe they have phthalate poisoning or other toxins, clear that out, and then you can go back and try that same diet plan and say, oh, is it working or not, right? So that's, 5 minutes, I thought you were saying that. So important. Sorry. Toxins, lots of them. They're everywhere. They're in your bed, they're in your clothing, they're on your skin, they're in your hair, and we need to be aware of them. We need to get rid of them. We need to minimize our exposure to them, and we need to have a plan of, wait, real quick, I just want to see, this is all really, this is great, but it's repetitive. All these toxins block hormones, they cause inflammation, they cause oxidative stress, they break down mitochondrial function, they obviously impact liver and become things like cancers and inflammatory diseases inside of our body. BPA is another one. Again, they're everywhere. But the point is not to be so afraid of your environment. The point is to become aware of your environment, so that you can pick different. There is a way through this. It's not just like, oh my God, I have to move. Because by the way, there's nowhere to move. We all have the same problem. So we have to learn how to navigate our way through the world. This is the current status of our planet. Here's where we're at. So if we could have a baseline effort to clean that up, that's amazing in terms of actual environmental cleanup. But most importantly, in this moment, it's managing that in our lives and in our health, and then mostly teaching patients. Doctor means teacher. Teaching your patients that this exists, that this is why this is happening, and how do we clear it out of you, and how do we stop it from coming back in. These are all, again, BPA, phthalates, stearin, they're all going to be, they're all going to affect ATP production. They're going to break down mitochondria. They're going to cause inflammation. They're going to shift your hormones. So I think it's common that we might look at somebody and say, well, you have thyroid issues, you have estrogen issues, and then we start right away, because we do a blood test, right? And we start seeing markers of, let's just say, hormone imbalance generally, and it's adrenal hormone, it's thyroid hormone, and it's estrogen. And then we start treating them directly just on those imbalances. When you start to say, wow, those are all endocrine organs. Okay, how does one person have 3 different endocrine systems that aren't, or 3 different endocrine glands that aren't functioning properly? Wait, maybe there's like a common denominator between all of these systems. Are there certain nutrients that all of these endocrine organs need to produce, right? So they're missing raw materials. Or is there some type of hormone blocker interfering with the ability of those hormones to either be produced, be sent out, or be broken down and recycled? And so that's kind of the take-home point that I really want you to get is, we're looking for these patterns so that we can understand common denominators, so that we could really impact these patients in a meaningful way. This is all fabulous, but it's all in your book. The stuff I'm saying might not be in the book. So you can read it later. In your home, mold, paint, carpet, couches, pillows, it's crazy. It's all there. So what can we do? I mean, that's really what we said. Okay, I think these are good. So do I have like 2 minutes? 1 minute. 1 minute?
50 gang.
Oh my God, choose. Look at your products in your house. I love this stuff, right? This is, in our house, we're not perfect either, and we're working on it every day. But, start looking at what are you cooking with? What kind of pots and pans do you use? Do you use a microwave or don't you? What are the ingredients in your fridge? And how many chemicals that we're talking about are just showing up in those foods on a regular basis that you're putting on everything that you're eating. So, it's a question of trying to prioritize, what's the easiest thing for you to do and what's the most important thing for you to do. And just start, and then make a list, and then just start chipping away at that list. That's the best we can do. As far as like slowing the flow, that's, I think, the best we can do. The rest of it is, what else can you do to improve your own health so that you can become a bigger glass? And then the last thing is, how do we start draining the bucket so that we can detox you effectively and clear that stuff out? And that's kind of the thought process I have with each of my patients. And that's what I'm hoping to help you guys think through when you're with yours. So that's it.